Good. Dear colleagues and friends, good afternoon. It is indeed a privilege for me to welcome the Socialists and Democrats here in Malta. And it is indeed also an honor for us that you chose Malta to hold your external group meeting. I think it is safe for me to state that this is a sign of trust of the S&D group in our government, for which we are thankful and grateful. Trust which is similar to that shown recently by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in her State of the Union speech, when she spoke about how Malta, through hard work and sheer determination, became an example to other member states. In this regard, I want to thank you, Iratxe, for bringing the group here. A special word of thanks here also goes to our MEP, Alex Ajus-Saliba. Thank you also, Iratxe, for your constant support to Malta and to the government's agenda of reforms to build a progressive and sustainable Europe. And although we might not agree on all issues, we are indeed proud to form part of the S&D group and political family, and to contribute to the good work being carried out within the European Parliament and beyond. This because our principles converge. In this spirit, I am also pleased that Malta was able to offer a platform for discussion where the group came together to reconnect and discuss the crucial challenges the EU and all its member states are currently facing. And although Malta may be small in size, it is small in size, our political will, however, and determination to move forward and contribute to the future of Europe are strong and significant. Recent months have been a time of renewal for the Maltese government, as shown by the significant reforms we have undertaken since January 2020 to strengthen democracy, the rule of law, and the institutions that protect it. Institutions are there to protect everyone living in this country, irrespective of race, belief, or gender. I must here, unfortunately, refer to an incident which happened earlier today, where a migrant worker was allegedly left abandoned at the side of a road by his employer after being injured at his place of work. This, if indeed true, is totally unacceptable. And I am informed that the police force have already started investigating this case. This attitude, I repeat, will not be tolerated. Under no circumstances. Every resident in our country will receive the protection of our institutions. We have also enacted wide-ranging legislation, including significant constitutional amendments relating to the strengthening of the independence of the judiciary, by also changing the method of appointment of our judges and magistrates. We also substantially increased capacity and resources in several key institutions, particularly those entrusted with the enforcement of our AML and CFT regime. And further implementation is already underway. Protecting the rule of law in Malta will remain a priority for this administration. And all these reforms took place with the COVID-19 pandemic unfolding, creating unprecedented and unexpected challenges. Throughout months of immense pressure since March 2020, where we focused primarily on protecting the health of our people, but in parallel, I would say with the same level of importance, we also ensured that the Maltese economy stayed strong and implemented a strategy to mitigate the negative effect of the pandemic on our people. We supported families, employees, and businesses with a very generous package of assistance, also here with the support of the European Union. And as a socialist government, our citizens remained our top priority throughout these last 20 months, and they will remain so. We wanted to make sure that no one was left behind or alone to fight the pandemic. And remember, Iratxe, this was the key principle which we discussed at our last meeting in Berlin a few weeks ago, where we had met to support Olaf Scholz's candidature in the German elections. Congratulations, Olaf. And this social heart is what we truly believe in. Our work on social justice, our work on civil rights and liberties, on the safeguarding of children, and increasing the active participation of women in the labor market. These have all been key areas for our government during these last years. The European pillar of social rights is, after all, our compass. And we have the results to show for this. As 2021 draws to a close, Malta looks ahead with the lowest unemployment rate in our history, the highest employment rate in our history, and the largest ever quarterly investment and economic growth rate in our history. Looking ahead, our commitment remains as strong as ever. We will continue doing our utmost to increase the rate of gainfully occupied workers even further, and to continue improving the conditions of people who are in gainful employment. The Recovery and Resilience Plan will strengthen furthermore our efforts to build back better. Through the implementation of further and important reforms, including those related to decarbonization, a crucial area which we indeed have to keep tackling, waste management, also at the top of our agenda, transport, education and labor market pathways, health, and the digital and innovative transformation. As Malta moves ahead to become a carbon-neutral island by 2050, 54% of the funds allocated to us, equivalent to 189 million euro, allocated to us through the Resilience and Recovery Plan, have been allocated to green initiatives. A plan which, here in Malta a few days ago, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stated was one of the greenest plans which she had seen. Friends, the future of Europe is in our hands. And that is why we are here in Malta this week, to come together to shape a Europe for the better. Indeed, yes, to build back better. And we can only do this successfully if we take a citizen-centric approach, by listening, reconnecting, understanding our citizens and what they want from the European Union. Let us use this week's meeting to unite under our shared goal of building a stronger future for our Europe. This is what our citizens deserve, and this is what we will deliver to them. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, dear Prime Minister. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you very much to all of you for being here. Thank you to the European MEPs for being here. I'll just give everyone a moment to get their headsets.
Segundos, sí, because I will speak in Spanish. Now it's okay, or we have to wait for someone? Sí. Bueno, pues reitero los agradecimientos.
Okay, so let me say a big thank you once again to Prime Minister Robert Abela, and a big thank you to the Maltese members. It would have been very difficult to organize this otherwise.
Que les estoy agradeciendo.
Sorry, I don't think the Maltese MEPs can hear me yet, so I'll just repeat it in a moment.
Eurodiputados y eurodiputadas.
So let me just thank once again the Maltese MEPs for all the work, all the cooperation. It's really been wonderful over the last few weeks to organize this meeting. This is the first meeting that we have had outside of Brussels since the beginning of COVID. This is really an important moment. It's a moment to rebuild contact with citizens, to go outside of the Euro bubble in Brussels. We have an opportunity now to have meetings in other areas of the European Union, and we can learn about people's shared concerns. Let me just say that we really acknowledge how well the COVID crisis has been dealt with here in Malta. We were speaking together before this press conference. 91% of the population vaccinated. It's really an excellent achievement, as well as the measures taken which have helped to support employment, for example, support to women, one of the more vulnerable sectors of society. I think it has been a real clear example of recovery to the other member states and across the EU. I think Malta is an example that this type of cooperation can provide really good results. I think it really shows that when we act united, we are stronger, especially when we go through situations as we have in the last few months. We wanted to come here to Malta to really show our support to Robert Abela's government and to the reforms he's putting in place, as well as the recovery plan, which I think perfectly embodies the vision of the Social Democrats for Europe, to really make the most of this investments coming from Next Generation EU, to really move forward with a green transition, a digital transition, and to do this in a fair, just way, so that economic growth will actually improve the lives of ordinary citizens, particularly those with most problems. And I think that's a real difference in the way that the crisis has been managed when we look at the 2008 crisis. If you remember, back in 2008, that was characterized by measures of austerity, which just increased social inequalities. So on this particular occasion, we have understood that if we want to move towards a fairer Europe, what we need is to tackle the challenges, but to do that with a social perspective. These are very important issues, as I've mentioned: the green transition, the digital transition, gender equality, as well as strengthening our public system. So this message is something I think that's really been taken on board by the Maltese government. It's been demonstrated by the work that they've been doing, and the President of the Commission was here in Malta and spoke about the recovery plan. So the President of the Commission, just to reiterate, really pointed out what good work Malta had done in this area. So we're very proud that a party from our political family is being a role model for other countries in the EU as to how to deal with these various transitions. The recovery plan, as the Prime Minister was saying, is an ambitious one. It really sets out the priorities of the EU. 54% of the investments for environmental purposes, looking at renovation of buildings, for example, solar panels, looking at clean energy for buses, for ferries, funds dedicated to the digital transition, which is going to be really key as well, and also investment in the area of health. As the Commission President said, in addition to the recovery plan, she also spoke about in the State of the Union address the reforms that the Maltese government was putting in place to strengthen the independence and efficacy of the judicial system, and we think that is something which is very important. This will also allow better tackling of corruption. There are also fiscal reforms, measures against money laundering. So it's clear that the Maltese government is showing the direction that it wants to move forward, and we are here, we're committed to working together to tackling all of these common challenges. And this can only be achieved by solidarity between member states. And there's another important aspect on the political agenda. We have seen the refugees coming out of Afghanistan, and we have to look at the migration issue as a whole. Afghanistan has helped focus people on a reality, but it's a reality that people who live in the south of Europe, I also come from a southern European country, we're very much aware of this problem already, and we realize now more than ever we have to have a common policy in the area of migration. It's a common challenge. The borders of Europe are shared borders, so we need this principle of solidarity between the member states. This has to be a shared responsibility. We have seen last weekend some Mediterranean foreign ministers came to Malta to look at that issue, and we think it's really key to look at migration policy and look at community tools that can be used, but we think the guiding principle has to be solidarity. Our political group is working on this and will continue to work on this and to insist on this principle. There's a huge amount at stake here. It's not just one specific situation here, but this is really at the heart of the European project. Solidarity is a fundamental value. That was at the very heart of the European project right from the start. So we are very much aware that we have to work on this. Speaking of solidarity, there's one further aspect that came up in the last European Parliament plenary debates, and that is the situation with regards to the climate crisis and the natural disasters that have occurred in Europe in this past summer. We have seen this in the north of Europe, in the south of Europe. There's been flooding, there's been fires, and it really shows that we need a solidarity corps in Europe that can respond to these situations. When we have a country that has to deal with this, there's often a call to neighbouring countries to show solidarity, but why not actually put together a European solidarity corps that can be called into action when necessary, when we face one of these situations? I will conclude in just a moment and, of course, be available for any questions, but let me just conclude with a message of support and solidarity to the Maltese people, to the Maltese government on this very important journey that they are taking. You will always have a group of Social Democrats in Parliament who believe in more and better Europe, and that is going to be to the benefit of the citizens. And we are committed to tackling people's problems, to responding to the challenges that exist in Europe. We are prepared, we have energy, we have motivation, we have enthusiasm, especially after the victory in the German elections. As we were discussing yesterday, social democracy is coming back to Europe. It is gaining strength, and we are going to continue to work tirelessly for all of these changes. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Dr. Abela and Ms. García. Malta has been an exceptional case when it comes to abortion, and I'm not sure whether, as an SND, you consider Malta's position to be tenable, and whether, Dr. Abela, you foresee a future where Malta changes its position on the subject. Also, on migration, solidarity obviously was discussed during this meeting, but do you foresee a need for more solidarity between the states, and should other countries do more to tackle this European issue? Thank you.
Grazzi. Ħalli nwieġeb mill-ewwel
I'd like to answer first.
domanda. Il-pożizzjoni tal-abort l-ewwel nett.
The position on abortion, in 2004, when Malta became a member of the European Union, we find in the treaty actually that the European Union cannot enforce abortion in any member state. But however, I understand that this is a subject which cannot be politicized. We shouldn't have a controversy, a political controversy on it. Therefore, this subject we should continue discussing it. There are those who are for or against. Everybody needs to have a say. However, I'd like to mention the rights of the unborn child, because in such a debate it would not be prudent if we do not protect those who cannot voice their opinion. And the subject, I've spoken about this before, even immediately after I became Prime Minister in January of 2020. However, obviously, I believe that the discussion should go on, but we should also respect the divergent perspectives. Therefore, I look forward to the continuation of this debate. Now, the concept of solidarity and legal immigration, what we see in practice, and we know what we're talking about, like the Italians actually. The concept of solidarity in the context of regular migration has become has had a toxic analogy. We can have an analogy when we speak about the vaccination. Solidarity was positive, European solidarity. However, when we speak about refugees, the approach is not coordinated. Actually, each and every country is left on its own. Our country, which is only 200 miles away from Libya, and Lampedusa is even closer to us, the burdens are disproportionate. When we speak about relocation, the numbers are really low. So even if the number of crossings has increased towards Malta, towards Lampedusa, how can we explain that Malta has overcome this problem, has controlled it actually? It's because our country is a small country, therefore our country can only take in so many. And when you compare our country to other countries, our burden has been disproportionate. Therefore, it's not just about solidarity that we need to speak about. We need to tackle the problem at its origin, and it's not Libya. We might think it is, but it's not the source of the problem. Libya has to face the immigration problem. Therefore, the approach, which should be coordinated by the European Council and the European Commission, is that we should regard Libya not only from the migration perspective, but we should include Libya and have Libya around the table. Therefore, we should also think about reciprocity. We should look into realize that and help them with the southern borders in their very own country, so that they are not inundated by refugees. I've been Prime Minister since January from 2020, and whenever I attend the European Council, a summit, I always mention this. And progress so far has been negligible. The problem has been controlled only by us, by our efforts, our daily efforts, together with the Libyan authorities, and every single day, morning, lunchtime and evening. Tomorrow I am called to court about an immigration case. So this is the burden we have to support. I would like to mention the point that any SAR rescue, any rescue in our SAR area, we do it. We do what is needed. However, I need to mention that the disproportionate burdens should be addressed also. Thank you.
Comenzando con esta cuestión relativa a la política migratoria y sobre si el elemento de la solidaridad es suficiente o no.
With this issue on migration policy and whether solidarity is sufficient or not, well, obviously solidarity is a principle which then needs to be turned into proposals, legal measures and European initiatives, and these need to be based on a commitment by all member states, because basing yourself on goodwill or solidarity from some member states doesn't resolve the problem that we've faced until this point, which is that there are some countries for clear geographical reasons who have to struggle with a higher level of migration pressure, and others who are doing much less. So for us, it's essential to establish members that would oblige member states to understand that issues such as the distribution of refugees is key, because responsibilities need to be shared here. And I also agree with what the Prime Minister was saying, which is that migration policy can't be looked at on a sectoral basis, just taking account how you manage the arrival of migrants to the European Union. You need to look much further than that. I mean, you have to look at the issue in countries of origin, and there you have to look at what's going on in many of these countries in terms of social inequalities, economic inequalities, demographic crises as well.
La propia falta de democracias en muchos de estos países
also
donde hay hombres y
the lack of democracy in many of these countries, and so that's what makes men and women leave, because they're risking their lives there. So the European Union has a major responsibility there as well when it comes to cooperation policy, for example, when ensuring that there is a consolidation of democracy, so that people don't feel they have to leave. I'm sure that many of these people would be much happier if they could live in their country of origin, so that they could have a future and opportunities for their children. But that's not the case in many countries, so many people feel obliged for issues that relate to economic opportunities or rights. They feel obliged to migrate. So we have to look at an issue that is multifaceted and provides us with a major responsibility. Now, moving on to abortion, you all know what the Socialists and Democrats group position on abortion, and you all know my position as the president of the S&D group.
Clara y firme defensa en los derechos de las
Clear
mujeres.
defense of the rights of women, but we're also very aware of the fact that there are differing views
Nuestra familia política, pero en
among our
cualquier caso
colleagues and various delegations as well. For example, the Maltese delegation, which is part of our family. But I would say that there's a debate which is ongoing in Malta at the moment, and I think that's an important thing, because many years ago there was no public debate on this. So I think the fact that you can hold a public debate means that different positions can be represented, and then everyone's going to have to come to some kind of agreement. But we're very aware that this first step has been taken, and that's something we want to recognise.
First of all, thank you both for your speeches. Prime Minister, if I may ask, Malta has been on the FATF grey list, and I say unfortunately, since the third week of June. 3 months down the line, would you be able to explain what you did as a government for Malta to be out of the grey list, and when do you plan for this to happen? I appreciate if you can list the things that have been done for us to be removed from the grey list. Thank you.
Grazzi. L-ewwel nett, nibda minn fejn tlaqna. Tlaqna minn
First
rapport
of all, the
fl-2018.
point of departure. We had the Manival report on 2018 from the Council of Europe. We needed to make structural modifications, which actually went back a number of years, even when Malta had a different administration. And we need to be honest with ourselves, because these things have happened in other countries. At the end of the day, each and every country encounters difficulties in its regulatory framework, and a country, every now and again, would need to update its laws about rule of law or other the anti-money laundering regulations. Therefore, when we received the report from 2018, in January 2020, when I became Prime Minister, we embarked on a very ambitious program. We started with the rule of law. This was not included in the Manival report. This was to be found in the Venice Commission report. Even if so, the two reports are separate, but in practice, when one actually looks into the both reports, you can see the link. You have the technical part, you have the rule of law, and there is a bit. Also, there is the political scene, and you need to address everything together. As regards the rule of law, we enacted constitutional reforms, the judiciary, the way it is, the judges are nominated, and as Prime Minister, I no longer have the right to appoint the highest ranks of the judiciary. And it is now a committee which is actually nominated by the judiciary itself, with also, obviously, there is 2/3 of the votes from Parliament as well. This is the way we worked on the judiciary modifications. We also, the Commissioner of Police, the way he used to be, this nomination used to be by the Prime Minister. Every single Prime Minister used to choose the police commissioner, but today there is a public call which is followed by scrutiny, independent scrutiny by the Public Service Commission, and the candidate is also examined by public grilling in the country's parliament. We also managed reforms in the specific sector regarding our struggle in the anti-money laundering. But in this country, we also always found these obstacles which came in our way. But with the majority that we had, whenever we did not need the 2/3 qualified majority, all the reforms were enacted immediately. But when we needed the 2/3 of Parliament, in order to go against criminality and anti-money laundering, we found other ways to address this deficiency, the structural deficiency in our regulations. And we found solutions, we'll continue to find solutions. I'm committed with my people. I did this with the President of the European Commission. The very first time I met her, I gave her my promise that the rule of law would be reformed in our country. The second promise I made was that we're going to learn our lessons from what happened in October of 2017 in Malta. Our lessons we have learned. the public inquiry is ongoing, but we have really learned our lessons. The result of all this was that Manival, in 2018, we couldn't address all the never-ending recommendations, but we actually managed, and the Manival, the 58 recommendations that were given, we managed to tackle them. So these were the reforms in our regulations. We strengthened the Economic Crimes Unit, the FIAU, and when we managed these structures, the FATF looked into the Manival report to actually, this checks the implementation of the reforms. And we only had these two areas that we really needed to reform. The FATF asked us to implement the recommendations from, we had to really put things into practice. And I would like to underline this. Marcus Player, the president of FATF, insisted that these things were kept confidential, and this is what I did. However, I can say that the dialogue is ongoing with FATF, because this is a reciprocal way of working. We show what we're doing and we get their feedback. We had a face-to-face meeting only recently. It was done online with the FATF institution, and I can tell you that our work is ongoing as regards the ultimate beneficial ownership, and the other point is the way we tackle tax evasion. These were the 2 points that we needed to, that we are addressing. We're still addressing the beneficial ownership of companies. I mean, and also tax evasion. And on these 2 points, my message is clear. My government, I can tell you that in the past months, we have supported all the different sectors of our society, our economy, the voucher system, 90 million euros we invested in the voucher system to support our economy and our citizens. So this is the principle of fiscal being moral in the tax sector in a very legitimate way. Everybody should pay taxes. We have public figures who do not respect this, and this is the system. This is why we want to govern in a different way. Therefore, FATF, we explained all this, and as regards tax evasion, this together with money laundering, my government on these points really wants to not only address them, but our target is to the grey listing that we're at the moment. It is what is really preoccupying us. We really need to get out of it, but we really need to know how plenaries, the joint groups, all the ICIG, we do not really know how it works, because FATF, you speak in a technical way and not in a political way, and you do not show that you are superior or that you are being arrogant, because that would be the worst kind of message that you can have. But in gaming industry and the other sectors of the economy that might be a bit might be preoccupied because of the grey listing, I can assure you that we are addressing all these problems. This government has the goodwill to get to these targets, and we hope this will be soon, so that we are not grey listed anymore. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As President of the Socialists and Democrats, what are your remarks on the fact that in Malta, during a pandemic, we have one of the lowest unemployment rates, also to the fact that the government has made a number of social incentives during this difficult time?
Evidentemente, la lucha contra el desempleo.
Clearly, the fight against unemployment is always a priority for our political family. We are aware that employment is the best tool to guarantee social justice, to give tools to the citizens so that they can fully integrate into society. We want to give them all the options possible. So this is excellent news. It is a clear example of how social democratic governments need to work. The next step is to ensure quality employment. That is also a priority for us, to ensure that these jobs have the right coverage, the right protections in place to fulfill the needs of our citizens. But we certainly very much appreciate the example of Malta, and I think it's a useful example for all of us. For the Social Democrats, tackling youth unemployment is particularly important to us across the EU. We were one of the parties that really pushed for the youth guarantee to try and ensure employment. You have a lot of young people who come out of training and just don't find the work afterwards, so that's something that we're working on. Perhaps if you will allow me, having listened to the Prime Minister who made a number of references to the ongoing reforms, I would just like to highlight one particular issue which is really very important to us. In recent years, rule of law has really been an important part of our work in the European Parliament. There are cases which are clear examples going in one direction or the other direction. Unfortunately, we are seeing countries which are now backsliding when it comes to defending the rule of law. There were laws in place to guarantee the separation of powers, for example, that the justice system could do its work independently, freedom of the press. Unfortunately, certain governments are now changing these laws to restrict rights. We have seen this in Hungary and in Poland. The government of Malta is completely the opposite example. There needs to be legislative changes made, and that is the path to follow. So I think it's important to highlight that. And I'm not just saying that as the president of the Social Democrats. We also heard from the president of the European Commission and the Venice Committee in the Council of Europe. All of them have acknowledged the progress that has been made in Malta, the steps that have been taken. So we will all continue to determinedly protect the rule of law. We are very aware what countries are moving backwards and what countries are working on legislative reforms and going in the right direction, which is the case of Malta. Thank you.
Question for President Perez, Andrea from Television Malta. How do you compare Malta's response to the pandemic and the economy with the situation of other European member states? Thank you.
I think that is a question for you. Or it's for me? Ah, for me. Sorry. I was thinking, okay, I imagine that the Prime Minister will think that is the best responsive. A ver, no, es interesante esta pregunta porque
It's an interesting
al
question,
inicio
that
de
one,
la pandemia
because at the start of the pandemic,
debatíamos mucho, ¿no? Teníamos tiempo para poder abordar cómo hacer frente a esta pandemia y vimos que era
we would tackle the pandemic, and we saw that it was a global pandemic. It was affecting the entire world, but it was having very different effects in different places. In some countries, the pandemic seemed to strike very directly, and other countries where things were a bit different. That was what was happening at the start of the pandemic. You'll all recall the two major countries where the pandemic was focused at the start. It was Spain and Italy who had large numbers of cases, but then that changed, and there were countries who had launched more relaxed measures to control the pandemic, which worked at the start, and then the situation changed and they started to have much worse figures, whereas those countries that had more, let's say, aggressive policies in terms of confinement, etc., well, saw their figures going down. So
una situación que jamás hubiéramos pensado
the
que
fact is we faced a situation that we could never have imagined. It was an unknown disease, and as time went on we started to learn more about it. But I think what was most useful to us was the lesson as to how important European solidarity is, the European project. When we stand together, we're much stronger. Let's think about the early stages of the pandemic. Member states were fighting among themselves to see who would be able to get hold of more masks or more breathing apparatus. I mean, it was a very human reaction when we saw that health systems were collapsing and we didn't have enough equipment to deal with the pandemic. So countries were competing in a completely unregulated, crazy market. No one knew where to get hold of respiratory equipment, protective equipment and masks. And so we saw that we needed a European policy so that we could work in a joint manner, and we started purchasing equipment together. The idea being not to leave smaller countries or those with less economic capacity behind. And then we continued with this European strategy. Had we not had a European vaccination strategy, imagine the country-by-country negotiations for vaccine doses and the cost of those doses. Obviously, it's very difficult today to be able to make an overall assessment as to who got things right and who didn't. But the fact is that it is safe to say that those who went for more Europe did get things right. They did better than the others. Those countries who implemented the European vaccination strategy got things right. And it's those governments who negotiated with the Commission and Parliament to come up with recovery plans that got things right as well. Those of us who were defending more and better European involvement, I think, got things right.
It's okay? Okay, thanks a lot.
Grazie.
Thank you. I thank everybody.